Have you ever wondered how different animals are the way they are? Or maybe you think about why there are so many species of dog. What about the difference between sharks and dolphins? The answer lies within the diversification of species. The word diversification comes from the medieval Latin word diversificar, meaning to make diverse. When we talk about diversification within genetics, we are talking about the process of creating diversity within a species, generally by the process of populations being separated for long periods of time. However, this theory can extend to selective breeding and other methods of selection. Imagine two islands, each with slightly different habitats. Here is a beetle, the standard model species for this example. These two islands were once connected with a land bridge that allowed for the two populations of beetles to cross over and reproduce with each other. Suddenly, a flood washed away the bridge and permanently separated the two beetle populations. Because these beetles could not fly, they become isolated from each other. These two beetle populations were subjected to two different habitats. The species needed to adapt to each of their new environments, and on one island there was little of the natural food that these beetles ate. So, through the process of natural selection and random mutations, these beetles may have had one of two things happen to them. Firstly, the beetles may need to evolve to have slower metabolic rates. This will allow the beetles to need to find less food and be able to survive longer periods of time without food. Alternatively, they may evolve to scavenge for food and eat anything from fruits to decaying flesh. However, on the other island there is an abundance of food, so these beetles can afford to be selective or fussy eaters and choose to eat a small variety of food. However, these beetles have other pressures on the island, though, such as predators, competitive species, and disease. Over time, these populations evolve so much that they would not ever be able to reproduce with the members of their parent species. This means that no matter what, these two species will always evolve differently, even when exposed to the same conditions. The theoretical model can be applied to any type of diversification, including planned speciation and diversification by humans. A practical example of this are the different subspecies of the domesticated dog and its cousin, the grey wolf. Humans found use in having another type of animal with them. This led humans to selecting wolves with favourable characteristics that suited the humans' use of that dog and separated the population of wolves from those that were ill-tempered or aggressive. Though some types of domestic dogs are still able to breed with the grey wolf, others are no longer able to. This has since been further exploited as humans deliberately allowing specific dogs to crossbreed for particular purposes or characteristics. Diversification within a species is considered a good thing by most evolutionary scientists. It allows for a greater chance of there being a gene that can prevent a species from becoming extinct during a global catastrophe. A non-diverse species, or a species that has a small population, or a population that can only be found in one part of the world, are highly susceptible to extinction, as they have been selected through evolutionary pressures to be perfect for the environment they are in. This means that they have become more susceptible to temperature change or disease. One example of this is with reef animals and food sources being affected by the changing ocean temperature. There are several big questions that still remain unanswered. How do species progress genetically from a single mutation in an individual to a population that all share the same genetic trait? And can two unrelated species become more similar? Imagine we have two populations of domestic cats. The first set of cats live in an area where their main food source is fast-moving marsupials, while the other set only has access to birds. If we take a look at the first set, eventually we will see a cat that has a mutation that allows it to run faster due to its increased stamina or muscle development. Nevertheless, it can run faster than the other cats. This gives the cat a statistical advantage over the other cats, and therefore makes it more desirable, as it can provide for its kittens and possibly feed its own clowder. As the gene starts flowing through the population, the faster cats start outcompeting the slower cats. Eventually, the favoured gene is passed all the way through the population. As this process is repeated, the population of cats becomes faster and faster, while the other population of cats change via the same method to become more suited to their environment. This means that if anything was to happen to one of the food sources, or the habitat, for either of these two cat populations, then the species is still very likely to have a flourishing population. The final question that still remains is whether two species that have been long separated can become closer as they are exposed to the same environment and evolutionary pressures. A prime example of this are sharks and dolphins. Sharks remained in the ocean when all the other animals, including the common ancestor of mammals, left the ocean. Then some animals, like dolphins and whales, came back into the ocean, and when exposed to the same environments as sharks, they have become accustomed via the same evolutionary processes that the cats were exposed to, and through this have gained fins, tails, dorsal stabilization, and similar skin, and have become more like sharks. Even though there are some obvious differences between these animals, such as hunting techniques, breeding methods, and reproduction, they have become more like sharks than they used to be before taking back to the sea. In summary, diversity in a species is a good thing, as it creates a buffer zone to protect against catastrophic disasters within the environment, and allows for some members of the species to survive. Extreme diversification to the point of not being able to reproduce with other members of different populations creates a species divide between the different populations. And finally, two species that are subject to the same environmental pressures and have become genetically closer, although not directly related, is the convergence of different species.